Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the second half of this meeting of Winchester City Council's Planning Committee, taking place in the Walton Suite of Winchester Guildhall. It's Wednesday, the 11th of June, 2025, and the time is 2 p.m. My name is Councillor Jane Rutter, and I'm Chair of the Planning Committee. To my right is the Deputy Chair, Councillor Jonathan Williams. Around the table, we have the other elected members of the committee, and we are supported today by a number of officers: Lorna Hutchings, our Service Lead for the Built Environment, Daniel Lucas, our Legal Advisor, the case officers who will change with each item, and Claire Buchanan from Democratic Services, who supports the committee and operates the recording equipment. This committee is being live streamed and recorded to the Council's YouTube channel. Subtitles are available, and advice on how to turn these on is set out on our website. I need to remind you all to ensure your mobile phones and any other electronic devices are on silent or preferably turned off entirely. In the unlikely event that it is necessary to evacuate the building, the fire alarm will sound. Please follow all the instructions given to you by our team. Please make sure you've looked at the handout provided on your chairs or on the information slides displayed as you walked in and during the breaks for further guidance about this meeting. Finally, can I welcome members of the public to the meeting? Those of you who have registered to speak, I will call you forward when it is your turn to make your contribution. Members of the committee may ask you questions of clarification, so please remain at the microphone until after members' questions. The microphone is turned on by pressing the button on the base of the unit, and a timer will appear on the screen to remind you of your remaining time. So our first item this afternoon is the one deferred from this morning, which is item number 7 on your agenda, which is at Shedfield Equestrian Centre, Botley Road, Shedfield. And our presenting officer is Rose Chapman. So over to you, Rose. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to draw members' attention to the update sheet where we had an additional comment submitted by Shedfield Parish Council. There were some changes to some of the conditions wording, and an additional condition was recommended. So here we have the red line plan. The application is to include the use of events within the red line area and a parking area as well to serve the equestrian uses of the Sand School, which is highlighted here at the point of the cursor. So here we have the aerial of the site. Botley Road runs along here at the point of the cursor. So we have the existing building here at the point of the cursor, which is a covered Sand School, which serves the existing livery and the riding school. The proposal would allow for equestrian related events to be taking place inside this building, as well as a parking area highlighted here. You will also note that there is some, the application will be partially retrospective to some degree. The parking area that you can see here, this is in relation to the temporary shop that this committee looked at a few years ago. So this is a temporary solution while this building over here is being built out. So here we have a proposed layout of the site. So it is proposed to have 48 parking spaces, including one for coaches, which you can see here, and some mobility spaces here. The site does provide riding for the disabled facilities, so this would give them a dedicated area for parking that would be away from the main area of the rest of the site. You can see there are a number of larger trees located. These are The ones to the north of the site are located within the ancient woodland. And this tree here, T15, it's proposed to remove an area of the existing hard standing that is down temporarily within the root protection area to ensure that there's no further damage made to that tree or their roots. Within the building itself, so at the top over here, this is the aerial view, and at the bottom here, so this area is the sand school, that wouldn't change, but the area here that's highlighted in orange and blue, this would be used for the events. And just a few photos of around the area. So at the top of the site, you can see the building on the left-hand side, that's the sand school. And you can see at the centre, at back here, this is the area that's currently being used by the shop for temporary car parking. At the bottom, this is another angle looking towards the barn and the temporary car parking space of the shop. The shop, you can see, is located here at the point of the cursor. And then finally, a look on the inside of the event space. Just to the right-hand side, you can see some internal windows there that overlook the sand school, so people would be able to watch. The recommendation is to approve. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We now turn to our public contributions. And the first is an objector, Joanna Harvey. Joanna, if you'd like to come forward, please. You have up to 3 minutes. The microphone is switched on by pressing the button on the base. So whenever you're ready, just press the button, that's it. Just press the button, that's it, perfect, thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Jo Harvey and I'm a resident of Shedfield for 15 years. Over that time, the site has grown out of control and become what only can be described as a shanty town, visually intrusive, overdeveloped, and a threat to the rural character of our village. The site is currently under enforcement and has a long, well-documented history of breaching planning permissions. Granting this new permission would reward that ongoing disregard for the law and set a dangerous precedent. Let me give a recent example. The shop was only just given planning permission with a clear condition that the retail area not exceed 580 square metres and that it be used solely for equestrian retail related to the riding school. The owners advertised on an article in the Hampshire Chronicle that it's 650 square metres, which is 12% larger than what was approved, a clear breach of conditions set. The not-so-equine shop includes a gift department, including alcohol, a dog groomers, and a cafe, possibly more. In the officer's assessment, I can quote, "It is considered that the site provides 18 parking spaces for the retail and office use of the building, yet already a parking space has been created for, I'd say, up to 18 cars, all without planning." This is clearly well beyond just equestrian and shows the pattern that apply for one use, then quietly expand. So yes, I'm deeply concerned about what was equine events buildings what will equine events buildings actually be used for based on past experience. They won't stick to the terms. That's not speculation, it's pattern. Now they want to create a hard standing parking for 48 cars on grazing fields. This is permanent damage to agricultural land and yet another blow to the rural landscape. Winchester's own Equestrian Development, SPD, says development must maintain and protect the character of settlements and the wider landscape. This clearly doesn't. I live nearby the site, and the site fronts a very busy road. The most dangerous part of any journey I take is pulling out of there. I say that as someone who's done speed watch for our community, the traffic involves HGVs, speeding vehicles, often over 50 miles per hour. And more events, more cars and more horse boxes, and it's only going to get worse. There's also no detail on how these events would be managed. With social media, these could attract hundreds. Once permission is granted, it can never be taken back, and they don't have a track record of sticking to limits. The application is in direct conflict with policy NE12, which requires that equestrian development protects rural character. Even now, the noise is intrusive and the site already contains rubble piles, landfill and methane issues. Every space filled.
You've run out of time.
Okay, that means basically, I just wanted to say enough is enough and please refuse this application.
Thank you very much. If you could just pause for a minute.
Yes.
In case members have a question of clarification for you. No, thank you very much indeed. You may return to your seat. No, I'm afraid you can't. No, but I think we've seen from the officer's report. Thank you. Right. We now have two ward councillors. Councillor Wallace first. Councillor Wallace, you have up to 5 minutes. And you know how to switch on the microphone. Thank you.
Right, thank you. Members will be familiar with this site, I'm sure. There have been numerous applications at the site, and they're mainly retrospective, and there's a lot of ongoing enforcement activities, as you know, including the ones called out in this application. There's the first floor dwellings on the site and the cafe. So the two things that are actually excluded, specifically excluded because they are under enforcement right now. You've heard from Joe just now about the issues that happen on site. It has been ongoing for a long time now, and unfortunately, there is a pattern of as Joe said, there is a pattern of not complying with the planning, any of the planning process. The reason we've got two councillors here today is really reflective of the wider disquiet that local residents have about the activities on the site as a whole. For this particular application, there's obviously concerns about noise, the traffic impact, the access arrangements, impact on the rural character, particularly being it is in a countryside location, and of course the ecological impact. My colleague Councillor Atchwell is going to go into detail on these issues about why we think the application should be refused. I just wanted to cut. However, if members are minded to support this application, I'm just going to ask you to consider modifying some of the conditions. On condition 8 around external lighting, I would ask that is limit the hours to 1 hour either side of the permitted event times. So in other words, change condition 8 to define that the lighting shall not be switched on between the hours of 9 PM and 7 AM. And also to consider modifying condition 12 to make it include definition of equestrian events, and to specify the maximum number of events as 4 per month. So there's not a whole bunch of events at the same time of the year. So this is sticking to more or less the number that's in there, but just making sure that they're not all happening at the same time of the year, which would have an impact on local residents. They're the key ones. There's some modifications, but I'm going to hand over to Councillor Atchwell now, who is actually going to go through a little bit more about the whole application and perhaps push back why we think it should be refused in total. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wallace. Councillor Atchwell, you have up to Councillor Wallace. If you could just stay there, and then we'll take questions of clarification to both of you at the end, if that's okay. Thank you.
Afternoon, Chair. Afternoon, Committee. First of all, I'd just like to thank you for changing the application to this afternoon. The main reason I requested that was because this applicant actually had another application to be heard this morning at Hampshire County Council. So it's going to be at the same time, 10 o'clock. But I was fortunate to request the officers at Hampshire and the chairman of the committee to defer the meeting because of lack of evidence. So they are going to now have a site visit next month. That's also something I'd like this committee to do. So, you know, we as a council, we're not against businesses. You know, we encourage businesses, but it needs to be in the right place. Here we are again, back at this table. This must be the third, fourth application on this site. It's still in the countryside. As Mrs. Harvey said, this is a shanty town happening under our eyes. So policies MT4, DM10, the development does not have an operational need in the countryside in this location. We already have several wedding venues in the nearby. There's been no business case to prove that this is needed. Policy DM12, the development does not minimise visual impact. The whole site, I mean, the impact on the neighbours, you've heard, it's absolutely dreadful. Again, DM12, the development involves hard standing parking for vehicles. So recently you agreed a plan to allow business in the front. Already the applicants built a car park without planning permission. I mean, this just goes on and on and on. And the human rights character of the area. I just want to mention the residents, they're totally fed up. The Human Rights Act says that residents should have a right to their back gardens and enjoy them. Currently on the site, there's excessive noise pollution already. There's been a serious impact on the mental health of some of the residents. Myself as councillor, other ward councillors, we get emails all the time about this site. The constant noise leads to stress, anxiety and sleep disturbances. I'm sure Jo wouldn't mind me saying, I know this happens to her on a regular basis. So just going back to the case itself, there's been no community engagement, which is something we always request. There's no business case. Also, some of the paperwork, the travel survey says there's estimated going to be 100 guests, yet the noise survey said there's going to be between 150 and 200 guests. So which one is it? It's just not clear. The noise survey also suggests there might be 50 vehicles needed for parking. But travel survey says, oh, we only need 27 spaces. So, you know, it's just not clear whatsoever is going to happen on this site. So I'm going to request that you defer the application today. We need some proper data. Last year, accidents, there's a fatality right opposite the junction. A 20-year-old boy died. This is the road opposite Chalky Lane. So that data isn't up to date either. So I have requested the traffic police for an update. I'm still waiting. So I'd like to defer this until we've got proper data, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Members, do we have questions of clarification for either councillor, please? Councillor Cunningham.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Ashwell, you mentioned wedding receptions. What makes you feel that there's going to be wedding receptions held there?
In the some of the data in the information I've looked at, it mentions about weddings. It's also advertised on Facebook that weddings are going to be made there.
Advertised on Facebook?
On their Facebook page, yes.
Does the property have a liquor license?
Sorry?
Does the property have a liquor license?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure. But that's already been advertised on
Thank you,
Facebook.
Councillor Cunningham. Thank you. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chair. On our update sheets, we do have the additional clarification on condition 12 that Councillor Wallace mentioned, which would sort of regularise, I think, 4.3 events on average a month, as well as trying to really sort of home down the events to be equestrian only. And it's partly something that Councillor Cunningham's already asked, but is it just sort of weddings that you've seen advertised, or you know, any further really?
Yeah, it's just weddings, but to be honest, the road they want to use, it's just a dirt track road. It's no proper road. So how are you expecting 100 or 200 guests to be going down that road, I have no idea. Because it's not a made up road. It's just a track.
Any further questions of clarification for our councillors? No, thank you very much indeed. You may both return to your seats. Thank you. And finally, we have a supporter, Mr. Patrick Barry. Good afternoon, Mr. Barry. You have up to 3 minutes and the button will switch on the microphone. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Chair, members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to speak this afternoon on behalf of the applicant. I would like to start by acknowledging that the officer's report provides a detailed and balanced assessment of the proposal. The application seeks permission to use the existing equestrian facility to host equestrian-related events as part of the continued equestrian use of the site. The existing building can accommodate the events without any internal or external works to the building itself. The proposal includes the creation of a landscape car park where vehicle parking has occurred informally in association with equestrian events that have been hosted at the site since the facility was established. As noted in the officer's report, the existing facility has a long-standing association with the Riding for the Disabled Association, and the proposed car parking arrangements will also resolve access issues for disabled riders using the existing facilities. As acknowledged by officers, the proposal is in accordance with the Principal Development Plan Policy MTRA4 of the Local Plan Part 1, which supports expansion of existing rural businesses which contribute to the local economy. The case officers consulted the Council's internal specialists to comment on the acceptability of the proposal in respect of all relevant technical and environmental impacts, including noise, trees, ecology and landscape. The Highway Authority has also been consulted. All consultees responded with no objection. While some concerns have been raised regarding the impact of the proposal on the amenity of neighbouring properties, the officer's report details very clearly why there would be no detrimental impact, and this view has been endorsed by the Council's Environmental Health Officer. In conclusion, this application is supported by the relevant development plan policies. It presents an opportunity to support the expansion of a local business and to support the ongoing viability of a facility that makes a significant and positive contribution to the local community. This contribution includes the provision of equestrian facilities generally, but also the provision of facilities for disabled horse riders. It does not result in any material harm to the environment or amenity of local residents. For these reasons, we hope that you will support your officer's recommendation for approval. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you. Could I just kick off the questions of clarification by asking, do you have a definition of what equestrian events are?
The equestrian events, I think the idea is that they would provide additional facilities in conjunction with events that are already held on the site. So with regard to advertised events, dressage and show jumping are the two principal events that are held at the site. So, for example, there could be an extension of those facilities in terms of an assembly area in the event if there's rain or whatever that might happen during one of those events. So it isn't really changing the character of the site. The site has held equestrian events for a long time, and I'm obviously, based on the level of objection, I think there's quite a bit of disquiet about what's happened on the site, what has happened at the site historically, what is its lawful use. And I think from my perspective, we're not looking to change that. The equestrian events will sit alongside the lawful use of the site and will just provide basically an expansion in accordance with MTRA4.
I think local residents are hoping for not an expansion of existing, but a reduction in existing activities to just equestrian events, which was why I asked about your definition of equestrian events. I don't think you've got planning permission for holding weddings at the moment.
Sorry.
Anyway, that's
just to be clear, there is a condition limiting it to equestrian events. So if there was a wedding held at the site, that would be entirely enforceable. It would be a breach of planning control.
So your equestrian events definitely does not include things like weddings. No. Good.
No.
Good. Okay. And my other question was about the number of events that are riding for the disabled. How often do you have riding for the disabled events?
I think the events incorporate riding for the disabled. They're not primarily for Riding for Disabled. The facility provides lessons for disabled riders on a daily basis and on an ongoing basis. I think when the application for the building was submitted to Winchester City Council, I was the agent for that application. We had a letter of support from Riding for the Disabled saying that the event provided an important facility for them. We haven't sought their sort of endorsement of this application because it's essentially an expansion of what's already provided.
Okay, members, Councillor Langford-Smith.
Thank you, Chair. My question relates to the car parking area. It's very formal, laid out car parking area. In my experience of equestrian events, people normally bring their horse with a trailer and they park in a field to then take part in an event. I don't understand the need for the formalised parking area. Could you explain, please?
I think the idea is that informally there's horse boxes, etc., parked in that field, and I think if you look at historical Google imagery, you can actually see them on the images. The idea is that the parking for those vehicles would revert to the other side of the building itself, within the equestrian area, and that this would provide for visitors basically attending those events, the parking areas that you see. And
You mean
obviously
spectators.
yes, and
Non-horse.
in terms of how the parking is laid out, the idea is the access points can be controlled from the north depending on the level of the number of attendees at those events, and the idea would be to try and use the parking areas. That's why they're segregated into 4 sections, to put parking as far away from residential properties if the number of visitors is more limited, and to then use, as you can see, there's a pathway on the southern side to basically, so pedestrians would leave their cars, come down to the southern end and use a pedestrian walkway. Within the noise assessment as well, which is an approved document, there is a list of mitigation measures, including the use of a marshal, and that's reflected in the submission as well, to basically ensure that people, when they come to the events, are channeled to the south and into the building away from existing residential properties.
Yeah, just one quick follow-up.
Thank you. So what you're saying is the 48 spaces are for 48 spectators, or possibly double that if 2 people come in the car, with the addition of the number of people turning up with horses and trailers.
If in terms of any equestrian event that's held within the building, the limitation is 100 guests within that. So if there's other attendees beyond that, the limitation is 100 within the building. That is the limitation of that's the limitation of the application.
Councillor White, please.
So potentially you've already answered it. There's conflicting numbers in some of our documents about the capacity. You've just said it's 100, but it's also mentioned 200 somewhere and 300. I just wanted to clarify exactly how many people you're expecting to come to these events regularly.
We're expecting, well, I think ideally, like any business, you probably want as many visitors as possible, so that limitation to be as high as it could possibly be. But obviously, officers are limited at 100. So, the reason for the discrepancy, it's not a discrepancy. We submitted an application originally with higher numbers. We did a consultation exercise, or the officers did, with the environmental health team. They raised some questions. The numbers were reduced as a consequence. Also, amplified music was restricted as a consequence. We updated the reports to reflect those changes, but I think whoever's read those reports has read the previous iteration rather than the more recently submitted version. And the same goes for the highways report.
So Laming.
Thank you, Chair. How many equestrian events do you expect every month? Then, do you have at the moment?
To be honest, I can't answer the exact number at the moment, but obviously in terms of what's proposed, there's a limitation in the condition, so there can't be any more than what the condition specifies.
Yeah, no, I'm just going to comparison.
I can have a look here because I have it on screen somewhere. So, for example, there's one event in June, 2 events in July, 2 events in August, 2 events in September, 3 events in October, 2 events in November, 2 events in December.
So you're looking at increasing that from 2 events on average to 3 and a bit.
Well, that's what the condition would limit it to, yeah. And obviously having that facility would enable that.
Councillor Cunningham.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Barry, can you tell me whether the premises benefits from a liquor license for the sale of alcohol on or off the premises at this time?
As far as I'm aware, it does not.
Thank you.
No more questions of clarification, members. Thank you very much indeed for coming
Thank you.
along today. Thank you. Right, that's the end of our public speaking. Rose, do you want to add anything before we come to questions?
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to make a comment regarding some of the people bringing in horse boxes. I think it's important to understand that the site also operates as a full-time livery. So a lot of people who are using the horses are not necessarily bringing their own horses on site. They already live on site. They're already there. So when assessing the parking, it was, I think there's a significant number of horses, around 30 on site at any given time. So the majority of those horses would be used by whoever is participating. Therefore, they wouldn't necessarily need additional spaces for significant amounts of horse boxes. So the existing parking around the front of the building that's relatively limited should be sufficient to maintain about 10 to 12 horse boxes, if not more, if needed. But the majority of the horses on site would be used by those participating in events.
So I think we move to questions now, and I've got a question. The car park at the moment, is that designed to be shared then between participants in equestrian events and the people who go to the shop?
So what is there as existing was put in as a temporary car park to serve the shop, while the new one is being constructed. As I understand it, the people making use of the equestrian school also started using it as it's a more convenient location that's away from the rest of the site, and therefore they wouldn't have to use the single track road that's also shared by Lockham's Recycling to access the site. So as existing, it's sort of used by both, but it's a temporary car park specifically for the shop.
So the shop car parking requirement will move away once the shop is constructed, is that right?
That's correct, yes.
Okay, and do we have any information on noise pollution? Have we had a report from Environmental Health about concerns on noise pollution?
So a number of noise reports were submitted. The original one, the Environmental Health Officer raised some concerns, so they did go away and look at it. They submitted an amended one, and that addressed all the Environmental Health Officer's concerns, and they had no objections following the amended noise report being submitted.
Councillor Wallace asked that the new condition 12 should limit the number of events in a month to no more than 4. Would that be a reasonable thing to add to that condition?
Theoretically, yes. We left it at 52 events a year, so theoretically one every weekend. But we didn't necessarily think that constraining it to a specific number per month, on the off chance that if you have one sort of every Saturday and then you have a bank holiday Monday, you might end up with more than 4. However, if the members feel that restricting it to 4 a month is reasonable, given that, as Mr. Barry mentioned, there's generally around 2 per month as standing, then that could be seen as a reasonable requirement, yes.
So we'd have to reduce the not exceed 52 to 48 and then say no more than 4 a month. Is that right?
I'd have to get my maths checked, but that sounds about right, yes. But we could amend the wording to, rather than saying 48, saying no more than 4 per month, or a maximum amount of this many per year, with some clarification as to how many per month would be required.
Right. Well, I'd like to propose to members that we amend that additional condition 12 on the update sheet so that it reads shall not exceed 48 events per calendar year, with no more than 4 in any calendar month commencing from the date of this permission. Is that agreed? Agreed. Okay. Councillor Small.
Yes, I've just got a question about when the original planning came through for the current building that we're talking about, was there parking provision as part of that application? And also, where was the access? Because obviously there would have been access talked about at that original application. Was that coming in on the bigger site or along the track that they want to use for this?
So the original application was in 2012, and the access for it was from the main key access that's currently shared by a number of commercial uses at the front of the site, and Lockens Recycling and a number of other unauthorised areas at the back. So this one would then have a dedicated access purely for the riding school and the equestrian area. As part of the 2012 application, there is a area of hard standing at the front of the building, near where some of the stables and a couple of the other fields that are used for the exercising of horses and grazing, and that provides a limited amount of parking, but as the current application before us kind of indicates, it's not necessarily enough for what they're currently using and the current daily need of the site.
Is that original parking to the sort of south of the building? As I'm looking at the plans.
So when looking at the building, it would be sort of to the southwest of the building. So it's along that longer elevation near where the main entrance to the sand school is, where they let the horses in.
Councillor White.
So I think I read somewhere that the cafe is unauthorised, but it's also part of, it's going to be used for the events. Am I right in understanding that?
So it's not necessarily unauthorised. I think since I wrote this report, it's been agreed that it's an ancillary use to the equestrian use of the site. The use of the cafe, theoretically, it could either be used continuously as it is, and people could then go buy refreshments as part of the application, as part of the events. Alternatively, it does have a kitchen use there, so if people wanted to self-cater an event, if they wanted a horse event, sorry, then they could have some sort of self-catered option as well.
Can I ask, is it reasonable to amend condition 8 as Councillor Wallace was asking, to 1 hour before and 1 hour after, so that the lights are switched off between 9 PM and 7 AM?
Yes, I think that's reasonable.
So can I ask, is it agreed that we amend that condition? Agreed. Thank you. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chair. Can I ask again around condition 12, whether it be reasonable, and we do this with tourist accommodation, to keep a register of events that take place? I'm just thinking for the residents, there has been a lot of enforcement around this site, and monitoring those events to sort of match up with what residents report may be something that I think would be more reassuring for residents, but also enable the enforcement team to really monitor that they're keeping to that number of events.
We could amend that. Yes, we could include that.
Want to propose that, Councillor Williams?
Yes, please.
Is that agreed, members? Agreed. Thank you. Councillor White?
And obviously we've conditioned the number of events through the year, but what about, I'm asked the question about capacity, and there's a big difference between 300 people turning up and 100 people turning up. Obviously there's a health and safety thing, the capacity is 100, but are we not able to condition how many people are coming to the events? It has a big impact because the car parking is measured on a certain number of people coming, and so it has an impact on all of this.
Megan? Lorna, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. Really, the capacity of the building is controlled by the floor space of the building, and the impacts of the number of people would be things like, for example, how they're arriving. So then we have to then look at what's the impact, the trip generation by the number of people that could potentially be in that building. And of course, we look at the highways consultation, and they really have no concern with the numbers of people that a building like this, because they do go on like floor area, would have. And that was actually even a higher capacity or a high number of events, or things like weddings as well. So the report sets out that even with sort of a more impactful use or more intense use, they still really didn't have any concerns about the highway safety. So in conclusion, we wouldn't normally specify number of people. It's quite rigid and inflexible. We just have to look at the general parameters for assessing impact, which is the floor space and other things like trip impacts.
Councillor Small? Thank you, Chair. I've just got a question, might be a silly question. Do we need to show a need for additional parking? The reason I ask, I understand about the events and people need somewhere to park, but even just us looking at this plan, there's plenty of potential parking areas on the site which wouldn't need to dig up a field and could be accommodated maybe other places. Is there any evidence that that's been looked at?
So in terms of the location of where the parking was, this application was submitted after the temporary shop use was already in use, essentially. So while we did look at if there were other less impactful areas for it to be located, essentially the damage had already been done to this location in terms of including the hard standing. So at the end of the day, it was considered that while there might be better areas, working with the applicant and getting them to something that could be more acceptable in terms of planting, and then they would make use of what was already there, was considered happy compromise, I think is the best phrase for it.
Right. I think perhaps the number of users is restricted by the size of the car park, isn't it, really? And other things that are outside planning, but are enforced all by other agencies. Is that right? Yes,
that's correct. Yes.
Good. So I think the 100 is what the maximum that we're looking at here. I don't think that anything we've said would enable them to think that they could have events of many more than that. It's just that we can't be precise in that, you know, there might be some people coming and going and horse riders and so on.
I think that's correct, yes.
Okay, so I think that's clear then. Right. If there are no more questions on the report, members, we go to debate. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to start off, and I know I'm not touching on material planning considerations on this specific application, but the site is notorious in the entire Meon Valley for enforcement issues. So I do welcome the additional tightening of the conditions. I would obviously we can only look at what's being proposed before us today and not look at those enforcement issues. But I do think it's worth saying in the debate that those are very much noted, and although we'd like to take them into consideration, we can't. With the additional conditions, especially around condition 12 on the number of events, as well as trying to beef up the enforcement system with a record of when those events take place, I think will work towards something that can be easily enforced in the future should they exceed the number of events. So although there are multiple issues around the entire site, if we're just looking at the red line application today, I think I am minded to support it.
Councillor White?
Yeah, so I echo what Councillor Williams has just said. I'm very sympathetic to the residents who live nearby who've had this ongoing enforcement issues for many years. But we have to take into account the application that's in front of us, and I can't see any sort of material harm in the change of use. And I think with the tightened conditions, I think we've got the conditions as tight as we can. So.
Councillor Aaron?
Yes, I just echo my colleagues really that just looking at the site as an aerial site, it looks awful, and I'm totally sympathetic with neighbours. But in some ways, I quite sort of welcome that there is a definite planning application with very strict conditions. So in a way, we know where we are now. We know, particularly with Councillor Williams' suggested condition about recording events, we will know exactly what's going on that side, and therefore with sympathy to residents on the whole site, I approve the application. Thank you.
So if there's no more debates, we move to the decision. So this application with the extra conditions and the amended conditions that we have agreed. So not exceed 48 events, no more than 4 in any one calendar month, and a record the applicant should keep a record of equestrian events, including the number of participants and audience members, so that we have a good idea of what numbers would have attended, and clear direction as to what those events were, so that we can be confident that they are equestrian events that are being held. As I say, and as others have mentioned, we are simply looking at this application that is before us, none of the other serious issues that and lighting, and we've changed the lighting condition as well from to 9 p.m. to 7 a.m. no lighting at all. So with those changes, can I see all those in favour of the recommendation to approve? That's 5. And those against?
2.
And abstentions?
1.
2. So that application is approved. Thank you very much. Right, we now turn to our next item on the agenda, item number 12, which is the application at Stokesbury Farm, Pound Lane in Meon, Stoke. And our presenting officer is Lisa Booth. Over to you, Lisa.
Thank you, Chairman. So the site in relation to this proposal is located off Pound Lane in Meon, Stoke, and is a small flat plot of 0.2 hectares that was originally part of Stokesbury Farm. And the farm was split up, and this area of land is now in the ownership of the applicant. So I believe that's Stokesbury Farmhouse, and this is the area here in hash. It's just an aerial photo of the site here. So it's just this area from here down and this building here. And there's an access there. So there are a run of redundant agricultural buildings, and some of these I believe have been removed now. A stable building and hard standing to the western end of the site, and a grassed area to the eastern portion. And existing access is goes on to Pound Lane, which is proposed to be used for this proposal. The proposal is to provide 3 shepherd's huts in the eastern grassed area, and to convert part of the existing barn, so this part here, into a 2-bedroom residential dwelling for use by the applicant to enable the running of the business, i.e. the shepherd's huts and the tourism part. Policy SD23 of the South Downs Local Plan allows for tourist accommodation subject to certain criteria. The site is well screened, and the shepherd's huts will have minimal impact on the surrounding landscape or character of the area. There are a number of public rights of way close to the site, linking to the wider national park, including the Meon Valley Trail to the east, and which links up to well-established long-distance trails, including the Wayfarers Walk and the South Downs Way. So the second part of the application is for the conversion of the former agricultural building to a 2-bedroom dwelling, with the remaining element of the barn being used for storage. It is sited in the countryside outside of any settlement boundary. It is proposed that this 2-bedroom dwelling would be a standalone open market family home for the applicant to service the tourist element of the proposal. However, due to the small scale of the tourist accommodation proposed, it is not considered that there is any overriding justification to support a dwelling or accommodation for servicing the shepherd's hut, and it is therefore contrary to the criteria contained in policies SD23, SD25 and SD41 of the South Downs Local Plan. And this is covered in greater detail within the officer report. As such, it is tantamount to a new dwelling in the countryside for which there is no overriding justification. Although neither element of the proposal is considered to impact on the landscape character of the South Downs National Park or neighbouring property amenities, the proposal cannot be supported as the principle of an open market dwelling within the countryside is contrary to policy, and the proposal is therefore recommended for refusal for the reasons set out in the report.
Thank you very much.
I was going to say I could just run through the
Yep.
elevate. So this is the conversion, 2 bedrooms at the back, and then open lounge, kitchen. It's an example of shepherd's hut. This is the entrance from Pound Lane. It's the sort of historical. I've sent this by the applicant's agent, so you can just see. This is actually him on the tractor, and the entrance to Pound Lane there. This view over to the building, and then this is the area past the fence, which is for the shepherd's huts. Again, another view of where the shepherd's huts will be placed. This is the entrance into where the barns are, and this is the barn to be converted to a dwelling. So thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Lisa. Right, we now turn to public speaking. And first we have Councillor Jerry Pett. No, he's not down. Well, we normally have the supporter last, Councillor Pett. So So I believe you're speaking as ward member and on behalf of the parish council, is that correct? Yes. So you have up to 5 minutes in that capacity as the ward member. Thank you, when you're ready.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity to speak to this case. As I said, I do so as ward member, but I'm also chair of the local parish council. The irony of Councillor Pett standing before you in support of a tourist application will not be lost on you, but this case is, I believe, unique among those previously taken by you. It's a proposal crafted with great care, not by commercial developers, but by Mr. Spreadbury himself, with the help of friend, neighbour and mentor, Mr. Medway. It has been well researched and is a realistic proposal to meet a market need that demonstrably exists. As you will hear, Mr. Spreadbury has lived on this farm his whole life. Times changed and the family ceased farming some years ago. Yes, his first intent had previously, during his father's lifetime, been to build a small bungalow to live on the family's land. He was, however, advised by both me and officers that this would be difficult in the context of the South Downs local plan, given that Meonstoke is regarded in planning terms as countryside. I did advise Sean that there might be an opportunity to develop a small tourist-based business on the site. As you will hear, he currently has employment as a landscape gardener, but he would be keen to be employed within the village itself. The site is very close, a matter of a couple of 100 metres from the South Downs Way, being routinely one day's walk either from or towards Winchester. There is some tourist accommodation for walkers in the village, namely the village pub and a B&B. Both are in high demand year long, and there is clearly space in the market. The report starts from the subjective premise that there is no justification for the operator of this tourist business living over the shop. It is then assumed that the proposal is therefore principally for market housing. It goes on to state that a new market dwelling in this location does not meet the criteria of SD25. I agree. But neither the wording of SD23 nor its supporting text gives guidance on the need for accommodation for an owner-operator on site. It certainly doesn't dismiss it, as the report does. But I submit that SD41, covering the reuse of redundant agricultural buildings, is of significantly greater import here. SD41G1 makes provision at the top of its cascade for conversion to housing for essential agricultural or forestry workers, or succession housing for former agricultural and forestry workers. The current local plan review expands this to include rural workers in line with para 84 of the December 24 NPPF. This states that decisions should avoid the development of isolated homes in the countryside unless one or more of 5 circumstances apply. One is that the development would reuse redundant or disused buildings and enhance their immediate setting. A second covers the essential need for a rural worker to live permanently at or near their place of work in the countryside. 2 ticks where 1 is required. Sean has been accommodated in the farmhouse now bequeathed to his sister. He has no home of his own. The application does indeed provide his succession housing whilst also enabling him to run his new business on site. And you may see there is a photograph of Mr. Spreadbury, as you saw in the presentation, ploughing this very paddock with his father. Whilst the team hasn't verified the picture, I hope you will trust our integrity on this point. It could very easily be verified if necessary. The report raises no objection to the proposed design of either the bungalow or the shepherd huts, and indeed makes clear that the development would have a benign effect on the character of the area. I would go further and suggest that a small bungalow constructed within a derelict barn to good design is clearly the required enhancement of the setting. In passing, you may have noticed that the parish council made no comments on the application. The lack of overt support for the proposal was only due to some members being very anxious not to create any precedent at all of new built form between the old railway line and the high streets, an almost hallowed tract of land locally. Several members have nonetheless contributed statements of support in their own right, and in my personal opinion, such anxiety was entirely unfounded, as the applications for reuse and indeed improvement of existing built form. Aside from that, you will have seen that, with only one exception, villagers have been fulsome in their support of the application, unsurprising given all that the Spreadburys have over the years contributed to our community. Mr. Spreadbury would be very happy to be conditioned for the proposed conversion to be an essential part of the overall business proposal and not to be disposed of other than as part of that business. He would be entirely open and proactive in total transparency of the progress of the business in terms both of its promotion through the South Downs tourism sites and providing details of the site's usage. In sum, this proposal is for a new tourism business, both making use of redundant farm buildings and providing employment and accommodation for its applicant within the farm in which he has lived all his life. To characterise it as new market housing in the countryside is simply factually incorrect. The application is a prime example of the intent behind policies SD23 and SD41, which enjoys the support of villagers for this popular and very positive contributor to village life. And it is in that spirit that I commend it to you.
Thank you very much,
Thank you,
Councillor
Chair.
Pett. Do members have any questions, clarification for the local councillor? No, thank you very much, Jerry. Oh, I'm sorry, Councillor Gordon-Smith. Can you use your microphone, please, Gordon?
Microphone. This new building, it matches the footprint of the old one, is that right?
Yes, as far as I'm aware, yes.
Right, thank you.
Yeah, it's actually inside the framework of it. Yeah.
Okay, lovely. Thank you very much indeed. And now we have Mr. Rob Medway on behalf of Sean. Thank you. Lovely. So, Mr. Medway, the microphone is switched on by just pressing the button on the base, and you will have up to 3 minutes when you're ready. And then if you could just wait in case members have got any questions of clarification. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you for your attention to this. I'm Rob Medway. I've lived in the Meon Valley all my life, and I've lived in Meonstoke for 55 years. I started this morning by opening the village church, as I do always. I'm chairman of the Meonstoke Football Club and have past president of the Farmers Club. The reason I say that is because I've come here unpaid, and I've been helping Sean for a year or so now in trying to navigate through what is a very difficult planning authority. I do that because I've known this chap since he was born in the village, and he was sadly born deaf, but he's overcome all those obstacles very, very well, and he now is a very high qualified landscape gardener working for Waitrose, and he is he's the manager of the football club. In fact, next week he is going to be awarded with the FA's award for 21 years of work for the football and the youth of the village and the community. So I think that's very well done. I say all that because you're not dealing with somebody here who has just come in and who doesn't have roots. The Spreadbury family are well known in the village and well respected, and that's why Councillor Pett is here and why he brings a wealth of support from the whole village. I was given that I would be speaking, and I wrote screeds and screeds, and then I was told I had 3 minutes, and so I desperately tried to put it in 3 minutes. I failed, and so I put it into a little leaflet which I brought along, and I'm told I can't give it to you. On the front it had 2 pictures, one that you've seen already, and that's the one about there's Sean with his dad actually all that time ago, and that's really him on the tractor. The other one is the football club. And so we said that that's one thing. I've also got to say something unique to you in that Sean's father died a year or so ago. John Spreadbury, a good friend of mine, and he was a man who in his testimony left, and he's speaking to you from the grave. It's unique. He said, I leave my farmhouse to my elder daughter Rita, and I leave the yard and the buildings to my disabled son so that he can earn a living. He doesn't want to live on handouts. And so this application, I think, is genuine and good, and it fulfills the things. I wish I could give you this because it explains to you that this isn't just housing per se. It's related to the business, and it conforms to the planning that I've put in here, which is 41 S41.
SD41.
Thanks for listening to me. I hope I haven't done too badly.
No, you've done very well. Thank you very much indeed. Members, do we have any questions or clarification for our applicant? You've been very clear, thank you, and I'll make sure that any issues are in the leaflet are raised
Okay, thank
with
you.
questions
Thank
to
you.
the officer. So
This
thank you
is a
very
good
much indeed.
application.
Thank you, thank you. If you could switch off the mic as you go,
Sorry.
that's lovely. Thank you. Very good. Right. Lisa, is there anything you want to add before we come to members' questions, please?
I don't think so, Chairman.
Members, Councillor Aaron.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to ask Lisa if it seems to me that there is a difference between a market house which is built as a new house and an existing farm building which is converted into or not even converted, built a house built inside the farm building. I just think even apart from what Councillor Pett told us, I think that in itself seems to me to be a more it should allow for some nuance, given that it is attached to a business, but particularly because the site of it will not, change. It's still an agricultural building, but it looks like that. I understand the principle of the market build, but also I am persuaded by it being attached to a business. And I mean, I don't know how easy it is to condition that.
Yeah, as I said, we have, I have looked into, as I said, I have, it's quite a small scale tourist operation. So I think to be able, I can't remember ever having an application where you've tied something to a tourist building. It's quite rare, but there isn't anything specific for that. But I think it would just have to be judged on how the scale of it was and the need to be present there. It's a bit like for agricultural workers dwelling, you have to provide the justification for having a dwelling on site. Am I needed to be there 24 hours a day? Am I, why am I needed there? So it's kind of, it's quite a big.
Normally when we're looking at planning applications, we don't question the motives of the person who wants to, for instance, self-build or we don't sort of say, well, you need to be there. They want to be there. I don't see how that's a sort of planning consideration, really. But I see what you're saying about the business. I understand what you're saying, but whether because he wants to be there, I don't see that's against the proposal.
Yeah, housing has to be, it's why we have settlement boundaries. So obviously there's a reason we have settlement boundaries, because all the facilities, services and routes and things like that, and within the local plan you can see an SDA 26 it's the need within our Winchester district for additional housing is practically non-existent. I think there was some in Westmeath, 11 houses it says in that. So obviously that might change now. The government required more, but it's since this plan's been, and I've been working in Winchester, there's not been any need for any other housing, sort of for windfall housing, and it's quite controlled through the policies. So for example, SD Void 41, open market housing is like the least, it's right on the bottom of the cascade. And I have looked through this and tried to, before, it's like it was a farm. Is there a chance for succession housing? Do you still farm there? And there are ways and means if it justifies.
Yeah, right. And is one of your worries that when sadly the present incumbent it has no more use for the building, that will enable a sort of a house just on its own without a business
Yes.
in perpetuity? That's a worry.
Yes, that's what it's looked at as an open market dwelling. So I'd like to live in the field and build a house there. I'd like to do that, but policies say I can't, because at the end I can just because it'd be nice for me to live there, I can still sell it on and for a monetary gain. So it seems like that. And another example is under permitted development rights. You can convert some old agricultural buildings to to residential. I'm in Winchester, but that excludes South Downs National Park. So,
Okay.
yeah,
Right.
there's various policies and there's various ways that you can have it, but it has to be justified.
Thank you.
Right. Thank you. There's quite a lot of questions. If I could just ask first. So Councillor Pett suggested that this was succession housing for a rural worker who is diversifying out of being a farmer and into a small business managing tourist accommodation on land that he currently owns, and using enhancing a redundant agricultural building. We are always asked to look at applications on their own merits, and each application is a unique application with its unique circumstances. And this one's probably more unique than most. Can we not, if you know, is our planning approach so inflexible that we can't, in this unique situation, come up with an agricultural tie or a tourism tie on this dwelling to link it forever to this role?
I was going to say,
Let's have some more questions before whilst you think about that.
Yeah.
So, Councillor Langford-Smith.
Thank you, Chair. I have 2 questions. So policy SD41 allows the conversion of a redundant agricultural building outside of the settlement boundary, with the specification at C that the original building is worthy of construction without the need for substantial reconstruction. So is it the officer's view that that building needs substantial reconstruction, and therefore that's why it's recommended for refusal? And my other question is, what weight are we allowed to attribute to personal circumstances? Thank you.
Chair, you're quite right, Councillor. That's a key part, because if you think of residential, it's a use, and that might fall into a new building, in which case there's a settlement, the settlement boundaries where those new buildings should go, or there might be pre-existing buildings. But we don't want to promote the use of residential in the countryside, because you'd have unchecked sprawling residential use, and we've got to protect our edges in our countryside. So then we want to use it as one of the cascade uses to retain the building with some purpose. In my opinion, this building isn't capable of conversion, but we haven't actually put that on the recommendation. But I think we probably could, because I think it fails that part of the policy as well. From all of the prior approvals I've ever seen, with these type of steel sort of clad buildings, that building will go and it will just be a new building, in my opinion. I know they're looking at perhaps building something inside it, but it's not particularly ideal. But yes, we're recommending refusal because it fails SD 41 in respect of its location, but also it's not really capable of conversion as well, and that is the criteria. We're retaining it, but through the use, primarily to retain a good building rather than allowing a use. But in answer to your question, Councillor Rutter, the SD 41 does allow, if you're happy with the conversion type element, but for things to support tourism. And we do allow from time to time staff sites, small staff accommodation units to serve tourist sites. But before that, we would normally expect to test the sort of functional need and financial need as well. Is that in the policies for South Downs as well, so like financial function, or is it just an understanding of operational need in the countryside? For that associated with tourism, so members are, yes, do consider the merits of that, I think, in terms of a diversification type opportunity, and this could potentially, but then what you've got also then is you've got new overnight accommodation. It won't have met the legal requirement for nutrients, so you're really in a difficult position with that as well, really. We can attach a condition, but we should have already tested through the metric and the nitrates calculator.
Oh yeah, we've done all that.
We have
a section 106 agreement.
Okay, that's fine.
We could add that in.
Yeah, so that would be a legal showstopper, so that makes sense.
Right. Councillor Laming. Sorry, did you want to come back?
Question,
yes,
sorry. Are we allowed to attach to personal circumstances?
None at all. None at all, I think is the.
Yeah, we would only, it's a very exceptional time when we would allow personal conditions on a planning application. It's just it's just such an unreasonable thing to do, because the permission should run with the land. So it should be about the land and the use rather than the individual person's circumstances. If it is about circumstances, it's normally because the unique nature of that particular commercial offering would mean that it would mitigate other issues, whereas somebody else with the same use, it wouldn't. So it's not normally something we would recommend. However, it can be done.
Councillor Laming.
Thank you, Chair. This is fairly unique, so I welcome some advice on this. It strikes me that this is a new business in tourism, which we try to encourage. And therefore, this building could be said to be part of that offering, particularly as the resident plays such an important role in the local community.
We would normally strictly control tourism. We've got quite a few conditions. Yeah, and although we look in the South Downs, we do look at yearly tourism. There are rules and regulations about when it's occupied and not more than so many weeks and by different people, and so it doesn't become someone's main residential property.
No, I get that bit from the for the shepherd's huts.
Yeah.
But for the actual residents there, that would be classified as being a necessary part of the management of the site.
But then you would have to form some sort of condition. We couldn't, obviously they would be living there permanently as a permanent residential dwelling. Yeah,
because the way I was framing this was, is it extra employment within the national park, which they're trying to promote?
It's just a dwelling.
Tenuous, but
it's just a dwelling. I don't know if it was an employment. If they were converting it to use for employment, then running, for example, landscape.
It'd be the site manager's office, wouldn't it?
Okay, thank you, Councillor Laming. I think we've got the points there. If you could switch your microphone off now, thank you. Councillor White and then Councillor Gordon-Smith.
I think it's really been answered. I was going to ask why does it not comply with farm diversification for employment use, given that the house is going to be for the to run the shepherd's huts, but I think you've already discussed it.
It's not a farm anymore, so it could be classed as farm diversification. So that's normally just to support the farm, that's already up and running.
Councillor Gordon-Smith.
Sorry, did I understand you correctly when you said the Class Q couldn't be done in the South Downs National Park?
That's correct.
Oh, right, thank you.
Right, if that's the end of questions, I think we go to debate. I'll start actually, because I think that if there's any point at all in having the planning committee, it's to make sure that situations like this get given planning permission. So I'm going to put as many conditions as I absolutely have to make this a tied tourism / agricultural dwelling to run these tourist accommodation. Shepherd's huts, I think it's succession housing, I think it's diversification from farming for a rural worker. I think it'll enhance the redundant building, and I am determined that we should pass it, and we will come up with a suite of conditions to allow that. But I now pass it on to others to debate. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chair. I agree. When I first became a parish councillor and asked to be on the Planning and Highways Committee at the parish, I was warned planning is a very emotive subject, but you must stick to the material planning reasons. But I think there are enough planning reasons to justify allowing this in this exceptional case. I think specifically around policy SD41 GI, in regards to succession housing for former agricultural or forestry workers, does apply, I think, enough to sort of allow this. There could be concerns about this sets a precedent, but it doesn't. We look at each planning application and its merits on as they come before us. So I think there is enough flexibility in the planning policy to allow us to support this application. So I'll be going against the officer's recommendation in support of approving it.
Councillor Laming.
I must say I wholeheartedly agree with everything I've heard so far. I also like to add that it's important to keep communities together, and that is of primary importance in this case as well, as creating employment.
Councillor Gordon-Smith.
Yes, I must admit, when I first saw this application, I thought someone is trying it on in a serious way. But I think after what Councillor Pett has said, and with my understanding of it, I think I'm rather prone to support this. I did ask whether the building had to match the existing footprint, because actually it's quite a large building. And I'm curious whether that is actually the case. Perhaps might also be a way of actually improving the landscape and getting rid of some of the beloved clutter that farmers always seem to have around their sites. But generally, I would like to support this.
I think the house won't use up all the space from what I've seen of the application, and the rest is planned to be used for storage. So that would clear up the clutter, wouldn't it? Because it could all go into storage in the barn. Who's next? Anybody else for debate? So this application is recommended for refusal. Can I see all those in favour of refusing this application, please? And those against? That's all. No, that's 8 members. And abstentions? 1. So now, members, we have to come up with planning reasons for to approve this and sufficient conditions, and then we'll vote again. So I think I mentioned SD41 and SD23.
Yeah.
You mentioned some specifics.
Yes.
Thank you, Chair. No, I was just going through for the benefit of the minutes, the reasons why we're sort of expressing that your wish to approve this planning application. And in conclusion, it's primarily like landing on SD41, where you've got several sort of areas there with the need for farm and rural diversification and the need for sort of perhaps some accommodation to service that. And then also in some areas with the sort of succession planning as well for the former farm worker there, and there's the operational need in that location because that's where the tourism is. So I think those sort of are fairly unique points primarily for the purposes of the minutes. So I think is it back to the vote in terms of accepting those.
Yes. If our officers are happy with those. Conditions we'll agree later, but it will include the usual requirement for a record of people who are using the tourist accommodation and restrictions on the amount of time that individuals can book for and that sort of thing. Nitrates.
Yes, that's a pretty comprehensive list of conditions. The other thing we've just been clarifying actually, because it says South Downs, that it would need to be tied down by a legal agreement as well, rather than just a condition. And then if that's not completed within 6 months, it would have to come back to committee for a further refusal or reconsideration of it. So it would be approval, result approved subject to the legal agreement, and then a suite of conditions which you've just sort of run through there, but that will be delegated back to us as standard. So.
Okay, so with those reasons for approval and conditions that to be agreed, but you've all been given a good overview of what sort of conditions we'll be looking for. Can I see all those in favour of approving this application? That's all members, so that application is approved. Okay, so sorry about that slight pause. We're now at agenda item 13, which is a confirmation of a tree protection order 2356 at 52 Cannon Street in Winchester. And our presenting officer is John Bartlett. Over to you, John. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So we received a Section 211 notice a few months ago in January to fell this oak tree, which is in a conservation area. Yeah.
Just doesn't work. Is it like the number lock? It just doesn't. Oh no.
Carrying on, the oak tree is situated in the rear gardens of 52 and 52 Cannon Street in the far corner, and is surrounded by a number of properties, including in St Swithin Street. Now, the basis for the proposal was the concern about possible future damage, and also concerns about the size of the tree and the dense canopy and blocking of light were all concerns that were raised. In terms of the distances from the property and the concerns about damage, we've only received speculative information at the moment. We did receive an arboricultural report, but this is also based on speculative information, and there is no evidence of actual damage being caused that has been forwarded to us in terms of concern about unseen damage or damage that is clearly visible. We have had no information on that. In terms of the daylight and also the dense canopy, we have indicated that we would be willing to accept a reduction on this tree, which is one of the last remaining significant trees in this spacing between St Swithin Street and Cannon Street, as you can see from the aerial photo. You can see that the kind of the growth, the outer growth near the crown of the at the top of the crown of the tree, so that's the previous regrowth, and we would be willing to accept cyclical maintenance on that tree with a cycle of 5 to 10 years to be able to keep that tree in proportion to its surroundings, which we believe that it has been thus far. Now, the tree is, as I said, one of the last remaining significant trees in that particular area between Cannon Street and St Swithin Street. It has a significant biodiversity value, supporting many different species. A mature oak tree can support 2,300 up to 2,300 species, possibly more, when it reaches maturity. And its importance is only increased by the fact that it's in this urban landscape. Whilst it can't be seen from Cannon Street or St Swithin's Street, there is clear views from it from St Swithin's Villas, which is a private close adjacent to these roads, and there are clear views of it from here, as shown in the photos. The other thing to say is that on a tempo assessment, the tree achieved a score of 18 points, which, according to the tempo methodology, it would definitely merit a TPO. And so we recommend that the TPO 2356 is confirmed. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We now turn to public speaking, and I'd like to call forward Dr. Sandra Steele and Nick Johnson. We just go. It's just Dr. Steele. Okay, lovely. So, oh good, there's a presentation. Excellent. And you have up to 3 minutes, Dr. Steele. Yes. And can you switch the microphone on? Perfect.
Before I start, can you hear me all right? And how do I change the slides?
We'll do that for you. So if you just wave your hand
wave.
or something.
I'll just
Yes,
wave.
thank you.
Right. Tell me when to start, will you?
When you're ready now.
Okay, good afternoon. You've just heard a justification for the TPO based on the opinion of a council officer. It raises several questions. First of all, why does it ignore the opposite recommendation made by an independent qualified consultant? The consultant's report dated the 8th of March that was provided to the council states this is not the right tree in the right place. I consider this provisional TPO to be completely unjustified. It also states there is a definite foreseeability of long-term permanent damage to the adjacent properties from this tree, and cites 5 case law precedents that are applicable. The consultant's overall recommendation is to fell the tree. John? Why were you not shown this street plan on which a 30-metre radius of the oak tree is marked? 30 metres is the safe distance from an oak tree to a building stated by the Association of British Insurers. At least 10 properties are within this 30-metre radius. This means we have a serious problem obtaining insurance. When we found this out last year, we notified the tree officer. So why has the safe distance been ignored? 3, and why has the problem of unseen root damage been ignored? The Arboricultural Association state oak tree roots may extend outwards for a distance of up to 3 times the tree's height. The oak is a high water demand tree. The spreading roots in search of water cause structural damage to foundations, pipes, drains, etc. And our historic houses that have been here for 100+ years are particularly vulnerable. A healthy looking tree may be good for the tree, but it's bad news for our properties. There's evidence of soil drying out, several dead trees, cracks in garden walls, etc. But we can't tell how far the roots have spread below ground and their impact upon our homes. Crown reduction does not help. The unseen problem of oak tree root damage, which is of great concern, and in addition, we face the problem of obtaining insurance. For these very serious reasons, we strongly object to the TPO and request you to allow us to fell the tree without delay to protect our properties. However, if you decide not to allow us to remove the tree, we would consider it an unreasonable decision. Also, if you decide not to allow us to remove the tree, will Winchester Council assume responsibility for the insurance of at least 10 properties?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's the end of your time. Members, do we have any questions of clarification for the for Dr. Steele? Oh, thank you very much indeed. Thank you. We're very clear. Thank you. If you could switch the microphone off as you go. Thank you. Right. Do you want to add anything, John, before we come to questions on the report?
Yes, please, Madam Chair. Yeah, we have reviewed the arboricultural report. What a number of the recommendations that have been given are based on things that haven't been seen, and we can't. There is no evidence of damage at this time that has been put to us. In terms of so we have to stick to what we can see and what we know in terms of evidence that's been provided. In terms of the radius of potential influence of the tree, the influence in terms of the radius that's been given is based on guidance that's meant for trees on shrinkable clay soils, and whereas there is a high risk of subsidence. In this particular case, we've and having looked at the British Geological records, the soil is chalk in terms of the bedrock geology, and has superficial deposits of sand and gravel. So this soil would be considered a very low risk in terms of subsidence damage. And in terms of the radius where the rooting area would be, we would consider that to be the BS 5837 2012 to be the best guide here, which is to times the stem diameter by 12. So the stem diameter given is 620 millimeters. So this would equate to a diameter of 15 meters, and also a radius of 7.5 meters. So outside of that, there would mainly be fibrous roots that form, rather than kind of larger roots. So in terms of its value in the landscape and the contribution it makes to taking carbon out of the atmosphere as well in terms of sustainability, and also the huge biodiversity value it has in an urban landscape, we feel that further evidence would need to be provided to justify the felling of the tree. But we will, of course, consider that if that is forthcoming in any future application. Thank you.
Thank you. So let's move to questions, members. Can I just ask, does crown reduction reduce the spread of roots?
No, so there hasn't been a definitive research that would say that reduction would reduce the spread of roots. However, there are far more drastic reductions of, say, 70 or 90% that would potentially have an impact, though that would obviously mean the tree loses all of its amenity value. And in this instance, we still haven't seen evidence of actual damage, so we don't see the justification for carrying out that kind of work at this time.
Councillor Langford-Smith.
Thank you. Sorry again, and a question for Mr. Lucas. Where do council stand on liability for the properties being uninsurable? Thank you.
Yeah, no, I think that's a fair point, and it needs to be addressed. Foremost, however, you're being charged here to confirm, obviously, the provisional TPO. Now, if I outline the tests for your decision before addressing your point about compensation, and indeed what the objector has placed on the slide quite starkly before us. So the test in confirming the TPO, there's essentially a two-stage test. If it appears to the local planning authority that it is expedient in the interests of amenity. So it can be argued that we've overcome the expediency test because we received a 211 notice. The 211 notice was an intent to fell the tree. So therefore, the expediency test has been met. We were placed on notice. That triggers the tree team to go out, review the tree, and hence we are where we are today. So respectfully, the expediency test has been met because we were put on notice that this tree was going to be felled in the conservation area. The test, however, goes on to say, is it expedient in the interests of amenity? Now here you've heard from the tree officer, the tempo assessment that evaluates the amenity of the tree by certain reference points and scoring points: size, locale, health, species, longevity, and so on. And you've heard from the tree officer that it met the threshold and surpassed the threshold. I believe it was 18 points on the tempo evaluation. So that means it definitely warrants TPO protection. So in regards to section 198, power to make tree preservation orders, the case on a balance of probabilities has probably been met. The expediency has been overcome. We received the trigger notice under 211 and the amenity assessment has been conducted. Turning to the compensation point now, there are separate avenues for compensation. It's not an avenue before you today, i.e. that test, is it expedient in the interest of amenity? There is a separate legal avenue to deal with potential claims. And the tree regulations make that quite clear. The tree regulations of 2012, if on a claim under this regulation, a person establishes that loss or damage has been caused or incurred in consequence of, and there's three causative factors that any potential claimant will need to prove: the refusal of consent, so that is to say, if you're minded to grant the tree preservation order today, if an application was to come in to prune, to perhaps reduce the crown canopy or raise the crown canopy, or indeed to sever the roots to stop any of those roots in actually incurring future damage. If that permission was refused, and we've seen these planning committee coming before us, if that decision was refused, then obviously you've got the causative factor under the regulations. So there are separate legal avenues, separate regimes, which at that point in time, when those factors and those facts have been met, i.e. there's been an application to prune or an application to reduce the crown canopy or to raise the canopy or whatever application is before us. But respectfully, we're not at that stage yet. We're only looking at whether or not it's expedient in the interest of amenity to confirm this TPO. And once that TPO, if you're minded to do so, is confirmed, anyone is at liberty to apply to do whatever work they want to do to that particular tree, indeed to prevent any future loss, as one is claiming and the objector before us here. So that is further down the line with respect. There is a separate legal avenue for that.
Thank you, Daniel. That was very clear. So if there are no more questions, we go to Councillor Laming.
John, how old do you think this tree is?
So we estimate it to be approximately 40 to 50 years old, I'd say, and going towards early mature, but yeah, semi-mature sort of age bracket.
So now debate. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chair. I think, as I think it's been said before, in regards to these applications, this is an application just to confirm a tree preservation order. It does not prevent any applicant from putting in an application in the future to fell the tree, to put, say, crown reduction, any other further works to it. We are simply here confirming that the tree has sufficient amenity value to be protected and to control the works that would be done to it in the future. So I'm minded to support the officer's recommendation to confirm the tree protection order, but again, to the objectors here today, that does not prevent you from putting in an application to fell or reduce height, etc., of the tree in the future. So I'll be supporting the officer's recommendation.
Councillor Gordon-Smith.
Yes, I'm generally very averse to cutting down a good quality oak tree, but I seem to remember we had a case a couple of years ago, didn't we, down in Whiteley? And it was proven that this tree was had damaged someone's conservatory at the back of their house. And we had to agree to have it cut down. So the fact that we are giving planning permission, accepting the TPO, confirming the TPO, doesn't, as Councillor Williams say, mean that an application can't be made to fell it if there is damage proven in a few years' time.
So I'm sorry, you've had your say. We'll take the vote now. So those who are in favour of confirming the tree preservation order, please show. I think that's all members. Yes. So that is confirmed, but it does allow you to come back and apply to have it, whatever. Thank you very much, everybody. That is the end of today's planning committee. Thank you.